For letting my father-in-law punish my mother-in-law after she caused my pregnancy loss? The door to my own home felt like a stranger's. Brandon inserted the key. The screech of the metal pierced my skull. Everything hurt me. The air, the dim light of the foyer, the silence. We went inside. My body was still an empty, aching reminder. Every step was a reminder. The small suitcase holding the few things I had needed at the hospital felt like lead in my husband's hand. And then I saw her. Patricia, my mother-in-law, was collapsed on the hardwood floor just before the archway leading to the living room. She had not simply fallen. She was prostrate, or rather kneeling, but without the strength to hold herself up. Her face was pressed against the floor, a pale smudge in the gloom. Brandon stopped in his tracks. I clung to the doorframe. She raised her head. Panic contorted her features. Traces of dried tears streaked her cheeks. Seeing me, a guttural sound escaped her throat. She literally crawled toward me. The skirt of her day dress tangled around her legs. "Hannah, Hannah, please." Her cold, bony hand clamped like a claw around my ankle, over my boot. I recoiled instinctively, but her grip was desperate. "Let her go, woman." The voice of Edward, my father-in-law, boomed from the living room. It was harsh, loaded with a fury I had never heard from him. He appeared in the archway. He was not a tall man, but in that moment he seemed giant, swollen with rage. And in his right hand he was brandishing the cherrywood walking cane. No, the everyday one, not the good one with the silver handle. Patricia did not even look at her husband. Her bloodshot eyes were fixed on mine. "Forgive me, for the love of God, forgive me. I did not mean to. You know that, right? You know." Her voice was a broken thread, punctuated by hiccups. "I did not want to cause the loss of the baby, Saying his name. Saying his name was like a fresh knife. I choked back a wave of nausea. Edward stood over her. His face, normally serene and ruddy, was ashen. "Intent. You talk about intent. You took my grandson from me, Patricia. You took him from this family." The cane rose into the air. The silver tip gleamed under the lamplight. "I am going to knock some sense into you. I am going to teach you what real harm is." The cane descended. It was not an empty gesture. It was aimed at Patricia's hunched back. It moved with terrifying speed and rage. My mind froze. The image of that cane cutting through the air, about to connect with that woman's fragile bones. Something snapped inside me. Before I could think, my body moved between them. It was not an act of bravery. It was a spasm, a visceral rejection of more violence, more noise, more fracture. "Stop." My own voice surprised me. Broken but firm. The cane stopped just inches from my arm, which I had extended like a shield. Edward was panting, his eyes wide, looking at me as if I were a ghost. "Hannah, what are you doing? Move. This woman deserves." "No." I cut him off. I lowered my arm slowly. I could feel an uncontrollable tremor in my knees. "Not here. Not like this." Patricia sobbed, pressing her face against my feet. Thank you, my child. God bless you." I did not feel blessed. I felt empty, frozen. Her touch burned my skin through the fabric of my pants. There was no forgiveness in me, only a deep disgust and a question crystallizing in my chest. Why? Why this performance of repentance now? Why this fear that smelled of pure panic, not remorse? I looked at Brandon. He had remained motionless by the door, my suitcase still in his hand. His face was a mask. Not anger, not pain, not compassion. Just exhaustion, a deep, irritating fatigue. As if this scene were a bad television show he was being forced to watch. Our eyes met. In his, I saw something, a spark of discomfort, yes, but underneath something else. Annoyance. Shame. I could not tell. He held my gaze for a second and then looked away, fixing his eyes on a point on the wall above his mother's head. "Brandon," I said, and my voice sounded strange in that foyer. "Help your mother up." He blinked as if coming out of a trance, and set the suitcase on the floor with a dull thud. He approached, avoiding my touch, and bent down beside Patricia. It was not a tender gesture. He grabbed her arm forcefully. "Get up, mother. That is enough." His voice was dry, impersonal. "You are making a fool of yourself." Patricia resisted, clinging to my leg. No, no, not until she forgives me. Hannah, for pity's sake. Do not touch me. The words escaped my lips. A whisper laced with ice. Do not ever touch me again. She flinched as if I had slapped her. Her hand fell open. Brandon pulled her harder and got her to her feet. She swayed, and he held her reluctantly, keeping her at a distance. Patricia looked like a rag doll, her head hanging, her gray hair disheveled. Edward was still standing there, the cane now resting on the floor, his fists clenched over the handle. He was snorting like an old bull. He looked at me, and for an instant the fury in his eyes mixed with something else. Confusion, maybe even a little respect. I had defied his authority, the tribal law of this household, and I had won. For now. Take her upstairs, Edward snapped at his son. To her room. Do not let her come down until she comes to her senses. Brandon nodded without a word and began guiding Patricia toward the staircase. She did not walk. He almost had to drag her. Her sobs turned into a low, persistent whimper. I was left alone in the foyer with Edward. The tension was physical, like a thick fog. He jabbed the end of the cane into the floor. I am sorry, Hannah, he grumbled, not meeting my eyes. For what happened for this? He made a vague gesture with his head toward the stairs. She is not well. I did not answer. What was I supposed to say? That it was okay? Nothing was okay. My son was gone. My womb was an empty reminder. And in this house the one responsible was crying, and the other seemed more annoyed by the interruption of his evening than by the loss. I am going upstairs, I finally said. My voice was flat. I needed to be away from here, from him, from everything. Edward gave a curt nod. Rest. Brandon will bring your suitcase up. I climbed the stairs slowly. Each step was an effort. Muffled voices came from the upstairs hallway. The door to my in-laws' master bedroom was ajar. I heard Brandon's low, firm voice from inside. I told you not to overdo it. Now look at this mess. A choked sob from Patricia was the only reply. I walked past, heading to the guest room, which was now mine, ours. Brandon and I had used the master bedroom in the east wing since we moved in after his grandmother's death. Now that room, with its big bed and the empty crib they must have already removed, made me nauseous. I entered the guest room. It was cold, impersonal. It smelled of cleaning products, bleach, and mothballs. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands trembling. The silence here was absolute. From downstairs came the sound of a glass being placed forcefully on the granite kitchen counter. Edward drinking. I closed my eyes, but I could only see two things. Patricia's hand, white with blue veins, clamping onto my ankle, and Brandon's gaze from the doorway. Not the look of a man who had lost his child. The look of a man whose plan had been disrupted by an emotional inconvenience. Something did not add up. Patricia's panic was real, visceral. The repentance perhaps not, but the fear was genuine. She was afraid of me. Why? Edward had said. You took my grandson from me. Not. You hurt Hannah. Not. We lost the baby. You took my grandson from me. Possession, ownership. And Brandon. Brandon had told me in the hospital, his eyes cold while I wept from both physical and emotional pain. You should not have argued with her, Hannah. You provoked her. You are always so sensitive, so dramatic. Sensitive, dramatic, for mourning the death of our son. A noise in the hallway. I tensed. It was Brandon. He pushed the door open with his foot, carrying my suitcase. He set it down by the closet. He stood there looking at me. His expression was inscrutable. Are you okay? He asked. It was the right question to ask. It sounded hollow. No, I replied, looking straight at him. I am not okay. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Mom, she is a wreck. She did not know what she was doing. She has her ideas, her fears. What fears, Brandon? My voice was strangely calm. What is she so afraid of? He blinked. A slow, calculated blink. Of losing the family. Of disappointing Dad. Of being left alone. You know how she is. No, I said again, holding his gaze. I do not know how she is. Because the woman who pushed me down the deck stairs was not crying. Her teeth were clenched, and her eyes were full of something more than rage. And now she is downstairs, terrified that your father will hit her. What happened while I was in the hospital, Brandon? What did you say to her? For an instant, a fraction of a second, I saw something flash across his eyes. A quick glimmer of alarm, then it was gone. It was like watching a metal shutter slam shut. I did not say anything, he replied too quickly. His tone became defensive. Just that you were right to be angry, that what she did was unforgivable. But she is my mother, Hannah. She has a heart condition. We cannot expose her to more stress. A heart condition. Of course. The universal excuse. I need to sleep, I said, looking toward the window. I could not stand to look at him for another second. He hesitated, as if expecting something else. A reconciliation, perhaps. A gesture. When he saw it was not coming, he nodded curtly. Well, good night. He left, closing the door quietly. The room was once again submerged in an oppressive silence. I sat on the bed, listening to footsteps going down the stairs, murmurs in the living room, the sound of the phone being dialed, Brandon's low, urgent voice speaking to someone. I could not make out the words. I stood up, my body aching, and walked over to the suitcase. I opened it. On top of the clothes, wrapped in a sweater, was the only object I had brought back from the hospital besides my personal things. A small black and white ultrasound, a blurry smudge, a tiny grain of rice that had been the center of my universe. I took it in my hands. I did not cry. I had no tears left. Patricia's fear, Edward's possessive anger, Brandon's cold irritation, and me in the middle, with a piece of paper that was the only witness to my son's existence. Something smelled rotten in this house. And it was not just my pain. It was something older, more stale. A secret. And Patricia's fear was the key. Outside in the backyard, a cold Chicago wind shook the bare branches of the oak trees. It sounded like whispers, like warnings. I curled up in bed, the ultrasound clutched to my chest, and prepared my heart for war. A silent war in which my weapon would be patience and my shield, the lie of having accepted their version. For now, the night was long, and somewhere in the house, a woman who had taken everything from me was shivering in fear. And I needed to know why. The days that followed were filled with a strange, tense calm, like the skin of a drum. I was a ghost in my own home. I walked the halls, ate in silence, avoided eye contact. Brandon tried to act normally, but it was clumsy, like an actor who had forgotten his lines. He brought me cups of herbal tea that I let grow cold. He would ask about my pain with a voice that did not reach his eyes. Patricia had disappeared. Almost. She locked herself in her bedroom. She only came down at odd hours when she knew I was upstairs. I would sometimes hear her moving in the kitchen in the dead of night. The clink of a cup, the soft click of the refrigerator door. It was the sound of guilt, or fear, prowling in the darkness. Edward had become sullen. He spent hours in his study with the door closed. The house smelled of pipe tobacco and resentment. He barely spoke to me. His anger was no longer directed at Patricia, but at me for having interrupted his justice, for being a constant reminder of the tragedy, for existing. I watched. I waited. The physical pain was subsiding, giving way to another deeper, slower pain, and to a determination as cold as marble. I needed answers. The scene in the foyer had not been repentance. It had been panic. And fear always has a cause. One night I could not sleep. The silence was too thick. I left my room, intending to go down to the kitchen for some water. The stairs creaked under my bare feet. As I reached the landing near the kitchen door, I heard voices, low, urgent whispers. I stopped, pressing myself against the wall. It was Patricia and Brandon. I cannot take it anymore, son. I cannot. She looks at me. She looks at me with those eyes as if she knows everything. Patricia's voice was a threat of anguish. She does not know anything, mother. Calm down. She is just hurt. Brandon was trying to sound firm, but there was a hint of weariness, of annoyance. She has a right to be hurt. He was my grandson too. Do you think I do not feel anything? A choke sob. But it had to be done, you understand? It had to be. I could not risk it. Your father, the inheritance, everything would go to the cousins in Dallas, to that branch of the family. Mother, please lower your voice. A warning tone. It is done. There is no turning back. Talking about it now is useless. What if she suspects? Edward is furious. He really thinks I did it on purpose, that I am a danger. The whispered word hung in the cold night air. You are not a danger. Brandon's voice was flat, as if reciting a lesson. It was an accident. A push without malicious intent. She slipped. We have been over this. That is the story. You know it. But it was not just a push, Brandon. I grabbed her, I pushed her back toward the deck stairs. I saw her lose her balance, and my God, a muffled sound, as if she had covered her mouth with her hand. My own heart was beating so loudly I was afraid they would hear it. I clung to the wall, holding my breath. It was not just a push. I pushed her back toward the stairs. Shut up. Brandon's whisper was fierce, sharp. Do you want to ruin us all? What do you gain by saying that here now? Sorry, my boy. It is just when I saw her there on the floor with the blood I thought of your grandmother. I thought about what happened. The curse. It is the same curse, Brandon. It is repeating itself. There are no curses, Mother. There are consequences. Now shut up and behave. Be nice to her. Humble. Repentant. It is the only thing we can do. If Hannah leaves or if she talks, it would be a disaster. Dad is already on the edge. And the baby, our baby. Patricia's cry was desperate, childlike. There was a long silence. Then Brandon's voice, low, almost inaudible. There will be another one. When this is over, when she recovers. There has to be. I retreated. Step by step, silently, I went back up the stairs. My mind was a whirlwind of ice. It was not just a push. It had to be done. The inheritance. The cousins in Dallas. Another baby. I entered my room and closed the door without a sound. I leaned against it, my legs trembling. I did not cry. The rage was a block of steel in my stomach, so heavy I could barely breathe. It was not just an accident. There was intent. Not clarity, perhaps not a cold-blooded plan, but a twisted will, an impulse born of fear and greed. And Brandon knew. He knew, and he was covering it up. For the inheritance, for the money. There will be another one. As if it were a replacement, as if a child were an object that could be replaced. The next day, while Brandon was at work and Edward was out at his club, I called Jenna. Jenna Foster, my friend from university, the only person in Chicago I trusted. She worked for a marketing agency, but her brother was an investigative journalist, and she had inherited his curiosity and his nerve. We met at a coffee shop far from our neighborhood, in Wicker Park. When she saw me, her smile vanished. She hugged me tightly without saying a word. Then, over 2 lattes, I told her everything. The hospital, the scene in the foyer, the conversation I had overheard. Her dark eyes widened as I spoke. Damn, Hannah, she whispered when I finished. This is heavy. Really heavy. I need to know more, Jenna. I need proof. About the inheritance, the cousins, about what she called the curse. About what happened with his grandmother. I cannot confront them with just what I heard. They will call me crazy or resentful. Jenna nodded grimly. She reached into her enormous handbag and pulled out a small device, no bigger than a $2 coin. It had a small clip. It is a high-sensitivity microphone. Sound activated. The battery lasts for days. You can put it somewhere they talk, in the living room, near the sofa where they sit, or in the kitchen. She slid it across the table to me. Be careful. If they catch you, things will get very ugly. They will not catch me, I said, my fingers closing around the small, cold object. It was my weapon. And I will start digging, Jenna added, taking a sip of her coffee. About the inheritance and the cousins. Big families always have skeletons in the closet, and trusts are treasure maps full of grudges. Leave it to me. When I returned home, the device felt like a ton of bricks in my pocket. That afternoon, while Patricia was dozing in the living room in front of the television, watching some afternoon soap opera full of tears and betrayals that seemed like a mockery, I slipped over to the large floor lamp next to Edward's favorite sofa. It had a heavy porcelain base. With a swift movement, I attached the small device with a piece of double-sided tape to the inside of the base, facing the center of the room. It was invisible from the outside. Dinner was another grotesque play. Patricia had come down. She was pale with deep dark circles under her eyes. She had made pot roast, Brandon's favorite dish. A gesture of peace, of forced normalcy. "I hope you like it, Hannah," she said without looking at me, as she served me a plate with potatoes, carrots, and a slice of beef. Her hands were trembling slightly. "Thank you," I murmured, not touching the food. Edward ate voraciously, focused on his plate. The sound of his fork against the china was the only noise for long minutes. "I spoke with the lawyer," Brandon said suddenly, breaking the thick silence. We all looked up. He was meticulously wiping his lips with his napkin. "About the paperwork from the hospital and all that. It is all taken care of." "What paperwork?" I asked, my voice neutral. "The administrative stuff. The medical report. All of it for the registry." He avoided saying, "For the fetal death certificate. You do not have to worry about anything." "How nice," I said, and my tone must have been sharper than I intended because Patricia flinched. "Hannah, my child," she began, but Edward interrupted her. "Brandon is taking care of it. It is the right thing to do. We have to move on. Life goes on." He uttered the phrase like a mantra, as if repeating it could make it true. "Without mourning?" I asked, looking him straight in the eye. "Without a moment of silence for the child who will never be born? Life just goes on just like that? As if nothing happened." Edward put his fork down with a sharp clatter. "Do not be melodramatic. Grief is private. You do not wear it on your sleeve. And this family has obligations. A reputation to maintain." "What reputation?" The question slipped out. "The reputation of a family where the mother-in-law pushes her daughter-in-law down the deck stairs?" Patricia let out a choked gasp. Brandon went pale. "Hannah!" Edward stood up so quickly his chair scraped against the hardwood floor. "Enough. We will not speak of this anymore. What is past is past. Patricia has apologized. You," he pointed a trembling finger at me, "will accept her apology and stop poisoning this house with your bitterness. It is your duty. As a wife, as a daughter of this family." I looked at him in the warm light of the dining room lamp. I saw a scared old man, afraid of losing control, of his perfect world of appearances cracking. He did not care about my pain, he cared about the scandal. "My duty," I repeated, savoring the bitter word in my mouth. "Of course." I stood up, leaving the plate of pot roast untouched. "Excuse me. I am not hungry." I walked out of the dining room. I did not go to my room. I went to the living room. I sat on the sofa directly across from the lamp. From there, I could hear their low but clear voices coming from the dining room. You see, Brandon? She will never get over it. She hates us." It was Patricia between sobs. "Be quiet, mother. For once in your life, be quiet," Brandon said, exasperated. "She is right, son," Edward said gravely. "This cannot go on. She has to accept it or leave." A heavy silence. "She will not leave," Brandon said finally, and his voice sounded strangely confident, almost defiant. "She has nowhere to go. And she wants to fix this. I know her." His words pierced me like ice darts. "She has nowhere to go. I know her." His confidence in his control was absolute. And the worst part was he was partly right. My family was in Seattle. My job, a graphic design position, I had put on hold. I had become dependent on him, on this house, on this life. I sat in the darkness watching the long shadows on the wall. The small device under the lamp was my only ally, my connection to the truth and to Jenna. I heard their footsteps disperse. Edward to his study. Patricia sobbing up the stairs. Brandon came to the living room. He stopped in the doorway. The light from the hall silhouetted his figure. "Hannah?" he asked. I did not answer. I pretended to be looking out the window into the black night. He sighed. "This is hard for everyone. But we have to try to move on, for the good of the family." "What family, Brandon?" I asked without turning. "Yours. Because mine, the one I was building, died on the floor of that deck." He was quiet for a moment. Then in a strangely soft voice he said, "We can have another one. When you are better, everything will go back to normal. There will be another one." The same phrase, the empty promise. The future painted over a loss. Go away, Brandon, I said, with no strength left to argue. Please. He hesitated, but eventually he left. His footsteps faded as he went upstairs. I remained alone in the silence of the living room, listening to the ticking of the old grandfather clock. My hand caressed my flat, empty stomach. There was no life there anymore, but inside me something else was being born. Something hard, alert, and filled with a silent rage that promised sooner or later to find its voice. And under the lamp, the small device kept recording, capturing the sound of my slow, determined breathing in the empty room. The first piece of my path to justice or my liberation was in motion. It was only a matter of time. The recording was clear, too clear. I had listened to it 3 times, headphones on, sitting on a park bench far from home. The murmur of water from a nearby fountain could not drown out the voices coming from the small audio file. I recognized them instantly. Patricia's high-pitched, anguished tone and Edward's deep voice trying to be calming but failing. They were talking in the living room at dusk, thinking they were alone. Do you not understand, Edward? It is not just the baby, it is her. She looks at me. She knows something. She knows nothing. She is hurt. You think everyone is judging you, Patricia? Is it because you judge yourself? You have not looked at me since it happened. You hate me. A sound that could have been a choke sob. I did what any mother would do to protect her son, to protect this legacy. Your father, may he rest in peace, made it very clear. The line continues with a male heir. Otherwise, the ones in Dallas get everything. Everything we have built. My father was a man of another time, Patricia. And you have gone mad with his ideas. With your fears. What happened with your mother, with your brothers, that haunts you. But what you did, Patricia. His voice was suddenly cold, cutting. What did I do? I secured your son's future. That girl, Hannah, is not strong. Her family is not of our class. At the first sign of trouble, the pregnancy gets complicated. And if he was born with something weak or sick, he would have been a burden, a disgrace. Brandon deserves better. A strong woman. One who can give him healthy heirs. Shut up, for God's sake, Patricia. Are you talking about my grandson? About a child? He was a possibility, a gamble. I could not. After Brandon, the doctor said no, that I could not risk it again. But he, my boy, deserves a complete family. He deserves to secure his name. If she is no good, another will be found. But first I had to clear the way. This incident will make her see she is not cut out for this, that this is not her place. There was a long silence on the recording. Only Edward's heavy breathing could be heard. My God, Edward said, his voice tired, broken. What have you become? Patricia, now crying again. What your family needed. What you needed. A healthy male heir has always been the only thing that matters. I was only trying to do my part. The audio ended there. I took off my headphones. My hands were not shaking. They were cold still on my lap. The afternoon sun was warm, but I felt an ice in my gut. It had not been an outburst. It had not been an accident. It had been an act of twisted calculation, based on superstition, greed, and a cruelty disguised as duty. Patricia had pushed me, literally and figuratively, to clear the way so that Brandon, seeing me as weak, would leave me and find a strong woman. And Brandon, how much did he know? In the conversation I had overheard, he had told his mother to be quiet, not to talk. Was he an accomplice? Or just a coward trying to cover up the horror? I put my phone away. I had the proof. Proof I could not take to the police directly, but it was a weapon. I knew the truth, a truth more disgusting than I had imagined. Jenna called me at dusk. I have got things, she said without preamble. Can you get out? We met at the same coffee shop in Wicker Park. This time her expression was grave. She had a brown folder on the table. Your husband's family, she began, lowering her voice, is more complicated than it looks. The paternal grandfather, Edward Sr., a tough man, made his fortune in the 1960s developing where he should not have and making deals with people he should not have. His trust is a masterpiece of control from beyond the grave. She opened the folder. There were photocopies of legal documents, hand-drawn family trees, notes. You see, the main assets, the company's several properties, are in a trust. The rules are crystal clear. Control passes from the current Edward to Brandon only if Brandon has a legitimate male child. If not, upon Edward's death, the control is diluted, and the majority of the assets and voting shares pass to the children of Edward Sr.'s sister, who live in Dallas. A branch of the family that, from what I have been able to track in old society pages, they do not get along with at all. In fact, they are in constant lawsuits over minor things. So if Brandon does not have a son, I murmured, the piece clicking into place. Your father-in-law loses control of almost everything, and so does Brandon. They would be left with a comfortable annuity, but no power, no family business, no legacy. Jenna made air quotes. For people like them, that is worse than death. It is humiliation. And Patricia? Patricia comes from a family that fell on hard times. Her father lost almost everything. She married Edward for convenience to save her family. From what I could find out from an old friend of her mother's, Patricia had several miscarriages before Brandon. Brandon was a miracle, and a very difficult birth. They told her she could not get pregnant again. Her value in that family depended on having produced one male heir, and only one. Jenna looked at me intently. Your mother-in-law has lived her entire life with the sword of Damocles of not being good enough hanging over her. And now she is projecting that pressure onto you. In her sick mind, your failure is her failure, and her failure means ruin, the loss of everything. Does it justify what she did, Hannah? Not at all. But it explains it. It makes her another victim of that screwed-up system. She is the one responsible, I said dryly. Yes, but scared people are the most dangerous, Jenna whispered. She is afraid of losing her status, her security, her husband's respect. She is afraid of the cousins in Dallas. And most of all, she is afraid of history repeating itself. Afraid that you, like her, will only be able to produce one child, and a less than perfect one at that. I took a sip of my water. I was not thirsty. I just needed something to do with my hands. Brandon knows. He knows about the inheritance. In the recording, Patricia talks about protecting the legacy. Of course he knows, Jenna nodded. It is his inheritance, his future. He grew up with that pressure. He may not agree with his mother's methods, but the goal is the same, an heir. You were the means, and the means failed its first test. Her gaze was compassionate. I am sorry, Hannah. They do not see you as a person. They see you as a womb. An instrument. The words were brutal and true. I had felt it from the beginning. My pain was an annoyance, a setback in their master plan. I have to confront him, I said. With this. I pointed to my purse where my phone with the recording was. Jenna put her hand on mine. Be careful. If he chooses his family, his inheritance over you, it could get ugly. Make sure you have a place to go just in case. She was right. I could not stay in that house after this. I made a call to my cousin on the other side of Chicago. Yes, Nicole? Can I stay with you for a few days? Yes, tonight. The return home was like walking to the gallows. The house was silent. I went up to my room. No visible suitcases, just a large half-empty duffel bag. Ready. I would wait for the confrontation first. I found Brandon in the study, in front of the computer, pretending to work. The screen showed stock market charts. He closed it abruptly when I entered. Hannah, how are you? His voice was forced. I need to talk to you, I said, closing the door behind me. I leaned against it. Alone. Here. Now. He frowned, sensing my tone. Of course. Sit down. I would rather stand. I took out my phone. I have been thinking about what happened. About why it happened. Hannah, please do not go back to that. It is hard enough as it is. Be quiet, I said, and the coldness in my voice left him speechless. Listen. Listen carefully. I pressed play. His mother's voice, cold, calculating, filled the room. I secured your son's future if she is no good. Another will be found. This incident will make her see she is not cut out for this. Brandon's face fell apart. First it was disbelief, then panic, then a ferocious anger. He jumped to his feet. Where did you get that? What is this? A recording? Are you spying on me, Hannah? Your mother confessed, Brandon. She said she pushed me on purpose to clear the way because my baby might not be good enough. Because the inheritance depends on a healthy child. A male heir. I took a step forward. You knew. You knew and you told me it was an accident. That I was sensitive. What else, Brandon? What else have you been hiding? It is a lie, he shouted, but his voice was shrill, fake. That recording is taken out of context. My mother is not well. She says things that do not make sense. She is disturbed. She is not disturbed, she crossed a line. I yelled back, all my rage, my pain pouring out. She caused the loss of my son, your son, and you are protecting her for money, for your inheritance. He stood still, panting. The panic in his eyes fought against the rage. And then something in him broke. His expression collapsed, not into remorse, but into a deep, cynical fatigue. And what do you want me to do, Hannah? He said, his voice suddenly flat, exhausted. Send her to prison? Destroy my family? Throw away everything my grandfather, my father have built? Over a pregnancy that was not even carried to term. The air froze in my lungs. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I no longer saw the man I had fallen in love with. I saw a stranger, a small, frightened man trapped in the gilded cage of his family name. He was our son. I whispered, my heart in pieces. And there will be others, he said automatically, repeating the mantra. When this is over, when you recover, when everything calms down, we can try again. Forget this. Forget, I repeated. The word tasted like ash. Never. I put my phone away. I am leaving, Brandon. He blinked as if he did not understand. What? I am leaving this house. This sham. You. I turned and opened the door. Wait. His hand grabbed my arm hard. Where are you going to go? You have nothing. You do not have a job here. Your family is far away. You are my wife. I shook off his grip as if it burned me. Stop touching me. And I am not your anything. Not anymore. I stepped into the hallway. He followed me. Hannah, do not be ridiculous. Think straight. If you leave, if you do something with that recording, you will lose everything. I will lose everything. Is that what you want? Revenge. I stopped at my bedroom door and turned back. I do not want revenge. I want justice. And I want to be far away from you, from all of your rotten family. I went in and grabbed the bag I had packed. It was not much. Clothes, documents, the small ultrasound. When I came out, Brandon was blocking the hallway, pale, his eyes bloodshot. I will not let you go. You cannot do this. Try and stop me, I challenged him. Call the police. Tell them why your wife is leaving you. I am sure they would love to hear the story. He hesitated. The implicit threat worked. He took a step back. At that moment, another door opened. It was Edward. He must have heard the shouting. His gaze went from his distraught son to me with the bag in my hand. What is going on here? He asked in a voice like thunder. Hannah is leaving, Brandon said, his tone defeated. Edward looked at me. Not with anger this time, but with a cold assessment, as if I were an asset about to flee. That would be a mistake, child. I am not your child. And the only mistake was ever stepping foot in this house. I tried to pass him. Edward did not move. He was stockier than his son. Listen to me. What happened was a tragedy. A moment of madness from Patricia. She will pay for it. She already is. But destroying this family will not bring your child back. If you leave like this with a scandal, we all lose. You two. Think about your future. My future, I said, locking my eyes on my father-in-law's sunken ones, is the only thing I am thinking about. And it is not here. I walked down the stairs, my heart pounding against my ribs. I expected Brandon to try and stop me again, but he did not. He just followed me with his gaze from the top of the stairs, helpless. As I reached the foyer, the front door opened. It was Patricia. She was coming in from outside with a small bouquet of flowers in her hands, probably from church. When she saw me with the bag, her beatific smile froze. Hannah? What is happening? I looked at her. I looked her in the eyes, and for the first time, I did not see a witch or an evil woman. I saw a scared old woman, trapped by her own demons and in the cage she had helped build. I felt no pity, only disgust. She is leaving, came Brandon's voice from upstairs, full of bitterness. Patricia turned pale. The flowers fell from her hands onto the tiled floor. No, please, Hannah, do not go. I am begging you. I am sorry, I am so sorry. I will do anything. It is too late, I said, and I pulled the door wide open. Blinding afternoon light flooded the dark foyer. Do not do anything for me. Do it for yourself. Pray for your soul, because you are going to need it. I stepped out onto the sidewalk. The street air, filled with the noise of traffic and normal life, hit me like a wave. Behind me, I heard Patricia's heart-wrenching scream, followed by Edward's hurried steps and Brandon's harsh voice trying to calm his mother. I did not look back. I closed the door gently and started walking. Each step took me further from the house, from the nightmare. The bag weighed nothing. I felt light, empty but clean. For the first time since the fall, I could breathe. I knew it was not over. There would be consequences, threats, maybe attempts to make me come back or to silence me. But I was not afraid anymore. I had the truth. And now I also had a path ahead of me. One that led out that door, down the tree-lined street, and disappeared into the evening light, far from them, far from everything. Nicole's apartment smelled of fresh paint and basil. My cousin, her hair up in a messy bun and wearing an oil-stained apron, hugged me without a word. She did not ask questions. She just led me to the small guest room, a bright space with a fold-out sofa bed and a stack of canvases leaning against the wall. It is yours for as long as you need, she said, and her simplicity almost made me cry. For the first time in weeks, I did not feel eyes on me evaluating me, my pain or my utility. Just the quiet, slightly chaotic space of someone who lived for her art. I put my bag on the floor. I had almost nothing. It was both liberating and terrifying. Nicole made me some tea and sat at the kitchen table, looking at me with serious eyes, waiting. I left, I said, and it was like opening a floodgate. I told her about the recording, the inheritance, Patricia's confession, Brandon's reaction, his words, over a pregnancy that was not even carried to term. As I spoke, Nicole's hands tightened around her mug until her knuckles turned white. My God, Hannah, she whispered. They are monsters. They are scared people, I corrected, unintentionally repeating Jenna's words. And scared people with money are the most dangerous. So what now? She asked. Are you going to the police? With that recording? I shook my head. It is illegal. A recording without consent. It would not hold up as evidence. It would only serve to warn them, to let them prepare their defense. I need something more. Something irrefutable. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Brandon. I looked at the screen without opening it. Hannah, please talk to me. We can fix this. Do not do anything rash. I deleted it. Then another. Where are you? At least tell me you are safe. Pure hypocrisy. I blocked his number. This was not the time. I needed to think, to plan. The next day, Jenna and I went to see a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but Marcus Reed, a gray-haired man with a sharp gaze who, according to Jenna, knew where all the bodies of Chicago's high society were buried. His office, in an old building in the Loop, smelled of old paper and strong coffee. I told him everything again. He listened, taking concise notes in a notepad, his expression unchanging. When I finished, he took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. First, Hannah, is your safety. You have left. Good. Do not go back under any circumstances. His voice was dry, practical. Second, the miscarriage. To press charges for assault resulting in the loss of the pregnancy, we need medical evidence directly linking the push to the miscarriage. The emergency room report is crucial. Does it say you came in after a fall? Does it mention a third party? Violence. I thought back. The pain, the confusion. No, I do not think so. I said I fell. I was so in shock at the time, and Patricia was crying, saying it was an accident. Marcus nodded as if he had expected it. Complicated. Without witnesses, without an immediate complaint, without any mention of assault in the report, it becomes her word against yours. And the lady, as you say, could claim a disorder, a momentary lapse. The sentence would be very light, if it comes to that. I felt a pit in my stomach. So there is nothing? I am not saying that. I am saying that path will be an uphill battle. But there are others. He leaned forward, lacing his fingers. The harassment, the threats, the psychological coercion. If you have recorded conversations where they admit to financial motives for pressuring you, where they make you feel threatened, we can build a case for domestic abuse. Not physical but psychological. That can lead to a restraining order. It is a start. And the inheritance? Jenna asked. That trust is not proof of motive, Marcus said. It is powerful context but not a crime. You cannot sue someone for having an outdated grandfather's trust, he added with a hint of irony. But it paints a picture of extreme pressure, of a hostile environment that could have driven the lady to act. For a judge, that can be influential. He glanced at my phone. That recording, even if it is not admissible in a criminal trial, gives me a lot to think about. And it can be a negotiating tool for them as well. I do not want to negotiate, I said, with more firmness than I felt. I know. But they will. When the fear of scandal becomes greater than the fear of justice, they will call. And then, he said, his smile brief and sharp, we will have the upper hand. I left the office with a mix of discouragement and determination. It was not the quick, clear conviction I longed for. It was a war of attrition, legal and psychological. Marcus had told me to collect everything. Messages, emails, any interaction. To note down dates, conversations, to keep a journal. Back at Nicole's apartment, I sat on the floor of my room and opened my laptop. I had to find a job. My personal bank account had little in it. The joint account with Brandon I would not touch. Not yet. I did not want to owe them anything. As I was updating my design portfolio, the building's intercom buzzed. Nicole was in her studio painting. I went to look at the small screen. My heart stopped. It was not Brandon. It was Edward. He was standing at the door, his posture rigid, staring intently at the camera. He was wearing his expensive coat and an impassive expression. Beside him, paler than ever, almost transparent, was Patricia. She was not looking at the camera. Her gaze was lowered, her hands twisted in front of her. I almost did not press the button to speak. Edward's harsh voice filled the small lobby. Hannah, we know you are there. Nicole told us. We need to talk. Let us in. Nicole must have heard, because she appeared at the studio door, her eyes wide. It is them, she whispered. I nodded. Do not let them in. Call the police. No, I said, an idea forming in my mind. Let me talk to them. From here. They are not getting in. I went to the intercom. I pressed the button. You have nothing to talk to me about. Please leave. Hannah. Patricia's voice was a weak, broken thread. Please let us explain. To ask for your forgiveness in person. You have explained enough, I said, keeping my voice cold. On the recording. There was a loaded silence on the other end. Then Edward's voice, lower, more contained. That was a mistake. A private conversation in a moment of desperation. It does not reflect the truth. It reflects the only truth that matters to me, I replied. Now leave, or I am calling the police and telling them you are harassing me. He was my grandson is what matters. Patricia burst out suddenly, her voice distorted by the intercom. My son's son. I did not want to hurt you, Hannah. I swear on the Virgin Mary. I wanted to pull you back from the edge. I lost pregnancies too. I know what that pain is like. You do not understand. You cannot understand. Her cry, filled with genuine anguish, hit me in the solar plexus. But I did not yield. You did not lose pregnancies, Patricia. You caused the loss of mine. And it was not to pull me back from an edge. It was to get me out of your way. To clear the path for your heir. That is not pain. That is evil. Patricia let out a heart-wrenching sob. I heard a scuffle, Edward's voice growling. That is enough, woman. And then him again on the intercom. His tone had changed. It was no longer just authoritarian, it was almost pleading. Listen to me, Hannah. She is not well. What she said are delusions. She has always had problems with the pressure, with the family. They hurt her. Her mother, her losses, they marked her. He took a deep breath. I am not defending her. What she did is unforgivable. But punishing her, destroying this family, what does that accomplish? I am offering you a deal. Here it was. What Marcus had predicted. The negotiation. I do not want your money, Edward. It is not money, it is justice. A private justice. His voice was fast, urgent. I will have her admitted to a clinic far away, where she can get help. The treatment she needs. Brandon and I will manage it. She will not bother you again. And you will have whatever you want. Compensation. We can annul the marriage, whatever you want. Give you an allowance. Whatever you ask for. No fights, no courts, no scandal. We can all move on with our lives. It was tempting, so tempting. To make her disappear, to send her away, to receive compensation, to move on in silence. It was the clean, quick solution their class wanted. To buy silence, to cover up the situation. I looked at Nicole. She was watching me, worried, and she slowly shook her head. No, she mouthed. No, I said into the intercom. I do not want your money. I do not want you to lock her up so everything can stay the same. I want her to admit what she did. I want her to say it in front of a judge. And I want Brandon to give me a clean, fast divorce with no conditions. You ungrateful, heartless girl. Patricia shrieked in the background. After everything we did for you. We gave you a home, a name. Edward must have covered her mouth, because only muffled sounds came through. Then his voice, as cold as marble. You are making a very big mistake, girl. You have no power here. No proof, no money, all alone. What do you think you can do? Ruin yourself. I offered you an honorable way out. There is no honor here, I said, and I cut the communication. My hands were shaking. I leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths. Nicole came and hugged me. You were incredible, she murmured. Incredible and brave. You mean stupid. I whispered, my face buried in her shoulder. You could have had money, security. And you would have lived with their secret. And they would have one, she said, pulling back to look me in the eye. That is not you, Hannah. I know you. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered it. It is Jenna, the voice said on the other end, breathless. I have been looking more into the inheritance. The Dallas cousins. I have contacted one of them. A woman, your husband's second cousin. Her name is Vanessa. She is very interested in talking to you. Interested? Why? Because, Jenna said, and I could almost see her triumphant smile on the other end of the line. She and her brother are the ones who would inherit control if Brandon does not have a male heir. And it seems they are pretty tired of waiting. And Hannah, they have a lawyer, a very, very good one. And they want a meeting. Tomorrow. I hung up. The world, which a moment before had seemed to be closing in on me, suddenly opened up in a completely new, unexpected, and dangerous direction. I was not alone. I had Nicole, I had Jenna, I had a shrewd lawyer, and now perhaps I had unexpected allies from within the very family that wanted to destroy me. I looked out the window. Edward and Patricia were still downstairs, next to a black SUV. He was on the phone, gesturing sharply. She, slumped in the passenger seat, looked like a broken doll. They no longer scared me. I felt pity for them, and a cold, clear understanding. This war was not just for my son. It was for my life. And for the first time I had an army. Vanessa Thompson was not what I expected. In my mind, the cousin from Dallas would be a younger version of Patricia. Elegant, rigid, bearing the weight of tradition and money on her shoulders. Instead, I found a woman in her 40s, dressed in jeans, a leather jacket, and cowboy boots. She had short, unruly, undyed hair and a direct smile that reached her small, lively eyes. Her brother, Justin, was more discreet. A suit, glasses, the demeanor of an accountant rather than a conspirator. We met in a private room of a discreet hotel near the Magnificent Mile. Jenna was by my side like a rock. Hannah, a pleasure. Though I hate the circumstances, Vanessa said, shaking my hand firmly. Her voice was raspy like a smoker's. This is my shadow, my brother Justin. He is the brains, I am the mouth. Justin nodded with a shy smile. We have been following your situation with great interest, and with great sorrow. I am very sorry about your baby. His condolences sounded sincere. There was none of the obligatory tone that Edward and Brandon used. I nodded, not yet trusting them. Thank you. Jenna told me you had information and an interest. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, studying me. Let us get straight to the point. We cannot stand the Chicago branch. It has always been this way. Grandfather Edward, the old man, was a tyrant. He chose my uncle, the current Edward, as his successor and relegated our branch, my mother, to a secondary role. The trust was his final stab in the back. It conditions everything on a male heir from the direct line, that is, a son of Brandon's. And you have no children, Justin, Jenna added, looking at the man. Justin shook his head. My wife and I cannot, and we do not mind. But our father and hers, he pointed to Vanessa, cared a great deal. They died feeling that what was theirs had been stolen. The trust is archaic and cruel. It is a time bomb, Vanessa continued. And your mother-in-law, Patricia, has lived obsessed with defusing it, with giving her son the perfect heir. You were the candidate, and when your pregnancy ended in her eyes, you failed. And she, in her madness, tried to clear the board. Do you know what she did? I asked, holding my breath. Vanessa and Justin exchanged a look. We know what we suspect, Justin said carefully. And we know from sources inside the clinic where you were treated that the story of an accident had holes in it. Patricia had a history of obsessive behavior. Years ago, when Brandon was little, there was an incident with a nanny. She accused her of trying to harm him. There was no proof, but the girl left. She has always been extremely possessive of her son and the family legacy. What we have, Vanessa intervened, leaning forward, is information about the trust, about the pressures, about Patricia's history of instability. What you have, as Jenna has hinted to us, is a recording. One in which she admits things. I said nothing. I could not trust them so quickly. We are not asking you to give it to us, Justin said, raising a hand. We are asking you to let us help you. We want the same thing you do, justice. And in our case, a change. That trust is unfair. If we can prove that the pressure it generated contributed to an act of violence, we could contest it, or at least set a precedent for future negotiations. We want the company, the estate, to be managed in a modern way, not by the whims of a sexist old man. And if I just want Patricia to pay, to get a divorce, and to forget about everything? I asked. Then we will help you get that, Vanessa said without hesitation. And in the process we screw over the Chicago branch. For us it is a win-win. But you have to know they are not going to sit back and do nothing. Edward is already pulling strings. His lawyer, old Philip Harrington, is a shark. They will be preparing their counterattack. They will probably try to paint you as an unstable, resentful woman who is making up stories to get money in a divorce. I know, I said. My lawyer, Marcus, had warned me of the same thing. We can provide you with cover, Justin said. Testimony about Patricia's character. About the family's obsession with the heir. Access to old medical records if they exist. And if it comes to a trial, we would testify about the unbearable pressure that trust exerts on the family. We would put the context on the table. I looked at these two strangers offering me an alliance. It was not friendship. It was a convergence of interests. I had something they needed, the living proof of the damage their system had caused. And they had something I needed. Resources, information, and a motive to see Edward and Brandon fall. What do you want in return? I asked directly. For you not to give in, Vanessa said. Do not accept their buyout for silence. Keep going. The longer this drags on, the more their rot will be exposed. And when it all blows up, give us the chance to talk to you, to have you tell your full story with names so the press cannot ignore it. It was playing with fire. It would mean exposing myself completely, but it would also mean exposing them. It was a mutual threat. All right, I said finally. But with conditions. I control the pace. I decide when and how to act. And I will not do or say anything that my lawyer does not approve of. Vanessa smiled, a wide, genuine smile. Just what we were hoping to hear. Welcome to the outcast side, Hannah. I left the meeting with a mix of lightness and vertigo. I was not alone. I had allies, self-interested allies, but allies nonetheless. Jenna squeezed my arm. They are good people deep down. Or at least they are the enemies of your enemies. That night at Nicole's apartment my phone rang. It was an unknown mobile number. I answered cautiously. It is Brandon. His voice sounded tired, hoarse. Please do not hang up. I have nothing to talk to you about, Brandon. Yes, you do. Something has happened. He paused. My mother is in the hospital. A cold shock ran through me. What? After yesterday? After you left, she collapsed. She said she could not breathe, that there was a weight on her chest. The doctors say it is a severe anxiety attack, but her heart is weak. She is under observation. His voice broke. Hannah, please, this has to stop. She is dying. Is that what you want? To cause her harm? The manipulation was so crude, I almost laughed. Almost. I did not cause her harm, Brandon. She and her actions put her there. He was your son too, he shouted, losing his temper. Do you not feel anything? She could die. I felt something, I said with a calmness that surprised even me, when my son was lost. And you told me I was being too sensitive. So do not talk to me about feelings now. There was a silence. I could only hear his ragged breathing. What do you want? Tell me. Money? The beach house? An apartment in your name? Tell me and you will have it. Just leave my mother alone. Forget that recording. I want a divorce, I said slowly and clearly. An express divorce for whatever cause my lawyer says. No opposition, no haggling. I will waive any alimony. I want my share of our joint savings, a fair half and nothing more. And I want your mother to confess in writing before a notary that she deliberately pushed me. You are crazy. She will never do that. Then we have nothing to talk about. I was about to hang up. Wait, he gasped. The divorce, we will talk about it. But the thing with my mother, she cannot. Not in her condition. It is a false confession. I have spoken with the lawyer. If you present that recording, it will be your word against that of a sick woman, deranged by grief. It will go nowhere, and you will look like a vengeful woman harassing a sick old woman. Think, Hannah. Do you really want that? It was the fear tactic, the same as always. But now I had backup. Talk to my lawyer, Brandon. Marcus Reed. He has all my instructions. And tell your father to stop sending me flowers and watching my cousin's door. The next time I am calling the police. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but with rage, not fear. They were cornered and they knew it. Patricia's illness, real or feigned, was their new shield, but it was also their weakness. It showed the fracture. The next day, I visited Marcus at his office. I told him about Brandon's call and the alliance with the Dallas cousins. He nodded thoughtfully. Vanessa and Justin Thompson are smart, and they have a lot to gain. Be careful they do not just use you as a battering ram. But their help could be invaluable. About the confession, Brandon is partly right. A confession under duress or from a person whose mental health can be questioned is worth little. But we do not necessarily want it for a criminal trial. Then what for? For the divorce. And for public opinion. Marcus's eyes narrowed. If we can get Patricia to admit in some way that there was pressure, that her obsession with the heir led to an incident, even if she does not admit intent to cause harm, we can use it to nullify any confidentiality clause in the divorce agreement. We can make noise. And that noise is what Edward fears most. Scandal hurts business, it scares investors. Are you saying I should use the threat of scandal to force a good divorce settlement? I am saying you have leverage. More than you think. They want silence. You can offer them silence at a price. A high price. Waiving all financial claims on your part is noble, Hannah, but not smart. They owe you. And not just money. They owe you guarantees. Your freedom. I spent the afternoon drafting, with Marcus's help, a proposal. It was not a lawsuit, it was an ultimatum. An express divorce by mutual agreement for irreconcilable differences. A significant financial compensation, framed not as alimony but as damages, which would be harder to contest later. And the signing of a confidentiality agreement by both parties. They would not talk about me, I would not talk about them unless they spoke first. It was a non-aggression pact. If they sign this, Marcus said, sealing the envelope, you leave with enough money to start over, far from here, and with the guarantee that they will not come after you. If they do not sign it, then the war begins. And in that war, we will unleash the Dallas cousins and everything we have found out. Sending that proposal was crossing the Rubicon. There was no turning back. I sent it by courier to the address of the family's law firm. The response came in less than 24 hours. A summons. Not for a friendly meeting, but for a mandatory family mediation. A last-ditch attempt imposed by the court to reach an agreement before a contentious trial. Edward was playing his card, the card of institutionalism of social pressure. The mediation would be at an official center, with a neutral mediator. They would come with their shark lawyer. I would go with Marcus. And, according to the summons, the attendance of the spouses and any direct family members involved in the discord is recommended. Patricia, from her hospital bed, was also summoned. The battle was moving to a new field, one with rules, and I had to learn to play fast. Vanessa called me that same night. They have invited you to the dance. Perfect. Go, and do not go alone. Take us with you in your head. We have an ace up our sleeve that not even your father-in-law knows about. What ace? Grandfather's trust, Vanessa said, and her voice sounded like ice. It has a nullification clause. If the designated heir or their conduct brings grave dishonor to the family name, the family council can vote to disinherit them. Edward always thought he controlled that council. He is wrong. And you. We have the votes, she said simply. If this becomes public, if it is proven that Patricia tried to cause harm to her daughter-in-law for the heir, and that Edward and Brandon covered it up, that is dishonor. And we will make our move. It is our checkmate. But we need the play to be public. In the mediation, do not give in. Provoke them. Make them show their true colors. I hung up, looking at the summons trembling in my hands. It was no longer just a fight for my dignity or for justice for my son. It had become a family civil war. And I was the pawn that could become a queen or be swept off the board. The mediation was in 3 days. 3 days to prepare, to rehearse, to bury the last remnant of love I might have left for Brandon, and to dress myself in an armor of steel. My son would not get justice in a court of law. I knew that. But maybe, just maybe, he could have accountability. And I could have freedom. That night I dreamed of the deck, of Patricia's hand pushing me. But in the dream, instead of falling, I grabbed onto the railing and looked back. And I saw not just Patricia, but Brandon, Edward, a line of men and women with blurry faces, all pushing me at once. And I did not fall. I held my ground. And then slowly I began to push back. The mediation room was cold, impersonal, with beige walls and a light wood table that seemed to scream neutrality. The air smelled of cleaning products and contained anxiety. When I walked in with Marcus, they were all already there. It was like looking at a sinister family portrait. On one side of the table, Edward, a block of silent rage. Beside him, Brandon, pale with deep dark circles under his eyes, avoiding my gaze. Next to him, an older man in an impeccable suit and with the look of a hawk, Philip Harrington, the shark. And on the other side, in a separate chair, like a convalescent ghost, Patricia. A private nurse stood discreetly behind her. Patricia seemed to have shrunk. She was wearing a loose, dark dress, and her hands, clasped in her lap, would not stop trembling. When she saw me, a spasm of fear crossed her face, and she immediately looked down. The mediator, a man in his 50s with the air of a tired civil servant, motioned for us to sit across from them. The table was wide. An abyss. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your presence. The objective today is to seek, through dialogue, a solution to this unfortunate family conflict, and specifically, to the terms of the separation and divorce of the spouses. The mediator began his prepared speech. I speak of practical solutions, thinking of the good of all. The good of all, Edward repeated in a deep voice, is to put an end to this circus. My family has suffered enough. Marcus calm spoke up. My client, Hannah, has suffered the loss of her child due to a violent act. The circus, as you call it, is the search for accountability and for guarantees for her future. Something basic. Harrington, their lawyer, smiled without warmth. Mr. Reed, we all regret the loss. But to go from there to constructing a narrative of a premeditated violent act is a leap that no judge will take with the flimsy evidence that, I am aware, you possess. We are here to be pragmatic, not to feed fantasies. Fantasies. My voice was loud in the quiet room. Everyone looked at me. Is your client's confession a fantasy? I looked directly at Patricia, who shrank even further. Is the inheritance conditioned on a male heir a fantasy? The fact that your daughter-in-law is here getting a divorce over an incident, Is that a fantasy? Hannah, please, Brandon intervened with a tone of forced pleading. Let us not start like this. We are here to fix things, to find a civilized solution. Civilized? I repeated. Like when you called me too sensitive for crying over our lost son. Or like when you offered to have your mother locked up in exchange for my silence. Is that civilized? Brandon turned even paler. Harrington placed a calming hand on his arm. Ma'am, Harrington said, addressing me with false patience. I understand your pain, but pain clouds judgment. What you interpret as confessions or pressure may be words taken out of context, uttered in states of emotional distress, even pathological ones. He glanced at Patricia. Mrs. Patricia has a long documented history of anxiety disorders. Any judge will take that into account. And the history of her obsession with a male heir? Is that also a disorder? Marcus asked, sliding a folder across the table. We have statements from former domestic staff, neighbors who speak of that fixation. And we have the trust of Edward Sr., which makes the majority of the estate dependent on that biological fact. That is not a disorder. It is a motive. A powerful motive. Edward slammed his fist on the table. That trust is sacred. My father's wish. And it is not the business of this mediation. It is, Marcus said calmly, if that wish created an environment of such extreme pressure that it led to an act of violence against my client. We are talking about psychological coercion, a hostile environment that directly affects the terms of the divorce and the possible compensation for damages. Compensation? Edward snorted. That is blackmail. She wants money. In the end, just like all of them. The word hung in the room. I noticed Marcus tense up, but it was Vanessa who spoke from the doorway. I had not seen her come in. She must have slipped in during the argument. Beside her stood Justin. Sorry for the interruption, Vanessa said, her clear voice cutting through the air. We were not summoned, but since the family trust is being discussed, we believe our presence, as part of the family and potential beneficiaries under certain circumstances, is relevant. We are Vanessa and Justin Thompson. Edward's face transformed. It went from anger to a purplish stupor, and from there to a hatred so visceral you could almost touch it. What are you two doing here? This is a private mediation. It seems matters that affect us all are being discussed, Uncle, Justin said with a coldness that contrasted with his sister's fire. Especially when it is mentioned that grandfather's wish might have motivated a serious situation. Harrington stood up, indignant. Mr. Mediator, this is unheard of. These people have no place here. The overwhelmed mediator held up his hands. In principle, the mediation is for the direct parties. We are a direct part of the family and the estate in dispute, Vanessa insisted. And we have information that can help contextualize the environmental pressure that Hannah's lawyer is talking about. She looked at her uncle Edward. We all know about the clause in the trust. The one that allows the family council to disinherit the main branch if it engages in grave dishonor. The council is not just you, Uncle. It is all the adults in the family. And we have the votes. A dead silence fell over the room. It was the first time anyone had said it aloud outside the halls of the family business. It was the bombshell. Edward was gasping. How dare you? I dare because what happened was not a domestic accident, Uncle, Vanessa said, and her gaze was now compassionate but firm. It was something dark. And if there is an attempt to cover it up, if the victim is pressured to keep quiet, that is dishonor. We do not want the company to sink in a scandal, but even less do we want harm to be rewarded. Hannah deserves justice, and this family needs some fresh air. Patricia, who had been like a statue, began to moan. A low animalistic sound. No, be quiet, Vanessa. Brandon snapped, on his feet now too. This is not your business. This is our family, our life. You caused the loss of a child, Vanessa yelled, finally losing her temper. Or you allowed it to happen. That taints all of us, everyone who carries that name. It was then that Patricia broke down. Not physically but inwardly. All the walls, all the lies crumbled. She lifted her head. Her eyes, filled with tears, were not looking at Vanessa or Edward. They were looking at me. He was not a child, she whispered, and her broken voice was heard in the absolute silence. Not yet. He was a possibility. A hope. A tear slid down her cheek. But I was afraid. So afraid. Afraid he would be a girl. Afraid he would be weak like my little brothers who never drew breath. Afraid that you, Hannah, with your common background, would not be able to give him the strength this family needs. Afraid that Edward would look at me the way my first husband did. Afraid of losing everything. That the ones in Dallas, she looked at Vanessa and Justin with an ancient grudge, would take what is mine, what belongs to my son. Mother, please do not say any more, Brandon pleaded, but it was too late. It was as if a dam had broken. I pushed her, she said, her eyes locked on mine. Yes. I grabbed her arm and I pushed her back. I saw the deck, the steps, and I thought if she falls, the problem is over. If she loses the baby, Brandon will be free. He can find another, a strong one. I did not think you could be injured too. I swear. I only thought about the baby. About the problem. She covered her face with her hands. I am the one responsible. I know. But the fear turned me into someone I do not recognize. It turned all of you into someone I do not recognize. Her gaze swept over Edward, over Brandon. You who only think about your inheritance. You who would rather buy silence than face your own mother. We are a family that lost its way. No one said anything. The confession, raw without excuses, hung in the air. It was no longer a recording. It was a live testimony before witnesses. Patricia's nurse approached, worried, but Patricia waved her away with a weak gesture. Edward had his head bowed. He seemed to have aged 10 years in a minute. Brandon was ashen, looking at his mother as if he did not recognize her, or as if he was finally seeing the truth he had always known and denied. Harrington, the lawyer, was the first to react. My client, Mrs. Patricia, is not in her right mind. This statement, under this pressure, has no value. It will have whatever value a judge decides, Marcus cut in, his tone one of contained triumph. But beyond the courts, it has already had value here. Today. He turned to the mediator. I believe the context of coercion and danger in which my client lived is now clear. We are no longer talking about just a divorce. We are talking about guarantees of safety and compensation commensurate with the physical, psychological, and moral damage. Vanessa nodded, looking at her uncle. The family council will meet next week, Edward, to vote on the application of the dishonor clause. Unless a fair, swift, and clean agreement is reached with Hannah. An agreement that includes her protection, and her silence if she so chooses. If not, we will take all of this with names to the financial press. Let us see how much your reputation is worth then. Edward looked up. There was no longer fury in his eyes, only an infinite fatigue and the shadow of defeat. He looked at his niece, at Patricia, at his son. Finally he looked at me. What do you want, Hannah? He asked, and his voice was that of an old, beaten man. I took a breath. I did not want his money, but Marcus was right. I needed security. I needed a new beginning far from their shadow. What my lawyer said. An immediate divorce. Compensation. Half of our joint savings now. And a confidentiality agreement for both parties. You do not mention me, I do not mention you. I looked at Patricia, who was watching me with the eyes of a beaten dog. And that she receives psychiatric help. Real help. Far from here. That is my condition. Patricia closed her eyes and nodded slowly. Brandon leaped to his feet. And me? What am I in all this? I lost my son too. For the first time since the mediation began, I looked him directly in the eye without pain, without anger, only with a deep pity. You, Brandon, lost the chance to be a man, to be a father, to be my husband. You traded it all to be an heir. Now, keep your inheritance and leave me in peace. He turned and walked out of the room, the door closing with a sharp crack. I did not see his face. It no longer mattered. The mediator, recovering from the shock, took notes. It seems we have a basis for an agreement. We will proceed to draft the terms. Outside in the hallway, Vanessa squeezed my shoulder. You did great. Brave. Thank you, I whispered. You too. Do not thank us. This benefits us. But at least this time the benefit goes hand in hand with doing the right thing. Or something like it, she smiled wearily. See you at the council meeting. Marcus and I left the building. The daylight hit my face. I took a deep breath. I did not feel joy. I did not feel victory. I felt a huge but clean emptiness. Like a field scorched by a fire, ready perhaps, for something new to grow, without the old poisonous roots. I knew it was not over. The signing, the money, the departure. But the highest wall had fallen. Patricia had spoken. The truth finally was on the table. And nothing would ever be the same for any of them. The agreement was signed 2 weeks later in the office of a notary chosen by Marcus. It was quick, cold, like pulling a rotten tooth. I signed, renouncing all future rights to the Sinclair family in exchange for a sum that Marcus considered fair. $250,000, not excellent, but enough to start several new lives far from there. Brandon signed without looking at me. His eyes were glassy, as if he still could not believe his world had completely crumbled. Edward, as the representative of the family estate, also affixed his signature with a thick, angry stroke. Patricia was not present. According to the confidentiality clause, they admitted no guilt, and I would not reveal the recording or the details of the mediation confession. In return, the payment was by way of an amicable indemnity, and by mutual agreement to overcome a painful family ordeal. A bunch of pretty words to buy my silence and their peace of mind. I accepted them. Not for them but for me. Leaving the notary's office, the Chicago air felt strangely light. Brandon stopped on the sidewalk next to me, while Edward and Harrington spoke a few steps away. "Where are you going to go?" he asked without looking at me, his eyes fixed on the passing cars. "I do not know. Far away." He nodded. Something was broken in him beyond his wounded pride. "The family council meets tomorrow. My father is not sleeping. He says Vanessa and Justin have the votes, that we will lose control of the company." For the first time, his voice held a note of genuine panic, not for me, but for the fall of his status. All because of a family squabble. I did not bother to answer. There was no bile or anger left, just an infinite weariness. "Goodbye, Brandon." He finally looked at me. His eyes searched mine for something, perhaps a remnant of pity, of love, of connection. He found nothing. "You really do not feel anything?" "I feel," I said, adjusting my jacket. "Relief." I turned and walked toward a waiting taxi. I did not look back. In the back seat, I took out my phone. I had a message from Jenna. "Victory coffee's on me." And another from Vanessa. "Council tomorrow at 10. Whatever happens, I owe you one, and I will pay it by never bothering you again. Good luck, Hannah." I smiled for the first time in months. A small, real smile. They were not friends, they were accomplices. And in this world, sometimes that was enough. The next day, while the family council met in some luxurious office on Michigan Avenue, I was at O'Hare Airport with a large suitcase and a one-way ticket to Portland. There was no plan, just the need to put the entire country between us. Nicole had hugged me, crying, promising to visit. Marcus had copies of everything just in case. Jenna had brought me a guidebook to Portland and a rain jacket. For the weather there. "Do not forget, silly," she said, her eyes shining. While waiting at the boarding gate, I connected to the Wi-Fi. I had an email from an unknown address. The subject, "Sorry." I opened it warily. There was no signature, but the style was unmistakable. Slow, ceremonious, full of pained pride. "Hannah, I know I should not be writing to you. Promised. But I cannot let you leave without saying something. I have admitted Patricia to a center in Colorado. It is for the best. She says between tears, thank you, that you saved her life by not letting Edward hit her that day. I do not thank you. Because if he had, maybe everything would have been simpler, clearer. Now I have a troubled mother, a defeated father, and I am going to lose the company that was my identity. The cousins will win and you will go free. Sometimes I think we all lost except you. Or that we all won something except me. I do not know. Nothing makes sense anymore. I wish you luck. Do not come back. Brandon. I read it twice, then deleted it. It was not an apology. It was a selfish lament. One last manipulation to make his pain the center of attention. It did not work. I closed the laptop. On the plane by the window, I watched Chicago shrink until it became a tapestry of lights under a twilight sky. I did not cry. I had a glass of wine and fell into a deep dreamless sleep for the first time since the fall. In Portland, the winter was mild gray. I rented a small apartment in the Pearl District. I started to walk, to get lost, to savor a coffee on a street corner where no one knew me, where no one measured me with their gaze. The settlement money was in a separate account. I did not touch it. I found freelance work for a local design agency, thanks to one of Jenna's contacts. It was not much, but it was mine. A month after I arrived, I received an email from Marcus. Brief, professional. Hannah, as you may have imagined, or perhaps not, being disconnected there, the family council voted. By a narrow but sufficient margin, the dishonor clause was activated. Edward and Brandon lose executive control of the company and the majority of the productive assets. They retain properties and annuities, but decision-making power passes to a board led by Vanessa and Justin. It seems Vanessa will be the new president. Rumor has it they want to modernize, sell toxic assets, and maybe even change the name. A new era, the business papers here are saying. Your name has not appeared anywhere. As we agreed, everything is being attributed to irreconcilable strategic differences within the family. Case closed. I hope you are well. Regards, Marcus. Case closed. For the world. For me, the wound was still there, but it no longer festered. It was a scar, hard and tender to the touch, but just a scar. One afternoon, walking through the Japanese garden, I sat on a bench. The air smelled of damp earth and flowers. From my purse, I took out the only photo I had brought. The blurry ultrasound. I had kept it for months like a reliquary of pain. I looked at it, letting the memory of the brief time I was a mother wash over me, with all its pain, but also with all its love. Then with calm hands I tore it into very small pieces and let them fall into a public trash can. It was not an act of forgetting. It was an act of burial. I was leaving there, in that new city, the remains of what might have been and was not. My son did not need a piece of paper. He lived in my memory and in the determination with which I now walked. The phone rang. It was Jenna on a video call. Her pixelated, smiling face appeared on the screen. Hey, Chicago girl. How is the rain and the coffee? Learning, I smiled. And you? How is the post-family scandal? So boring. The new Sinclairs are dreadfully dull. They make donations to NGOs and give interviews about equality. It is a drag. I miss the drama, she joked. Then she got serious. And you? Are you really okay? I looked around me. The garden, the trees, people strolling far, far away from decks, from cold stares, from whispers about heirs. Yes, I said, and this time it was completely true. I am okay. One day at a time. Well, on to the next one, she said. And if you need anything, you know where to find me. I am still digging around. I hung up. I stayed on the bench a while longer, watching the evening fall. It was not happiness yet. It was peace. An inner silence that came not from emptiness, but from acceptance. I had lost a son, a husband, a life. But I had won myself. And in that moment, under the gray sky of Portland, it was more than enough. As I stood up to leave, a cool breeze brushed against my face. I welcomed it with my eyes closed, breathing deeply. Then I started walking with no fixed destination, but with each step firm in one direction. Forward. Time in Portland had a different texture, slower, more my own. It was not measured in tense family meetings or follow-up doctor's appointments, but in the changing light on the brick buildings, in the leisurely pace of afternoons in a cafe, in the slow but steady progress of my feet on the wooden floor of a dance studio. The contemporary dance class had been Nicole's idea. You need to connect with something that is not your head cousin. Something with roots, but that is just yours. And so, twice a week, I would stand before the mirror in a studio in the Alberta Arts District, surrounded by women of all ages, and learn to keep time. It was not easy. My body was stiff, my movements still carrying the memory of protecting myself, of shrinking. But the music, the deep beat, and the sharp echo of feet on the floor began to stir something in me. It was not joy. It was something more primitive. Rhythm. A pulse. The confirmation that my body, despite everything, was still alive and could create sound, movement, strength. When I finished, I would be sweating and breathing hard, and for a little while, the emptiness would be filled only by the vibration of the music. The freelance work was steady. I designed logos, websites, visual identities for small businesses. It was a small, controllable world where my past did not exist. I had met a few people, other transplants-friendly neighbors. Nothing deep. I was not ready for depth. My heart was still under construction, with caution signs hanging everywhere. One bright, cool Sunday afternoon, I went to the Japanese garden. I liked to lose myself among the lush vegetation, to feel the silence broken only by the chirping of birds. I found a free bench next to a pond. I sat down, took out a book and let the peace wash over me. That is when I saw her. A few meters away, on a gravel path wide enough for a wheelchair, a small figure was being slowly pushed by a woman in a uniform, a nurse or a caregiver. She wore a shawl over her shoulders despite the sun. Her hair, completely white, was pulled back in a soft bun. Her profile, the line of her nose, the way she tilted her head, a shiver ran down my spine before my mind could put a name to what I was seeing. Patricia. It was not the hysterical Patricia, nor the pale specter from the mediation. This was an even more diminished version, as if the fury, the fear, and the guilt had finally consumed themselves, leaving only the extinguished embers of a very old, very tired woman. Her hands, clasped over a blanket covering her legs, were still. They did not tremble. The caregiver stopped the wheelchair right at the edge of the pond, with her back to my bench. She sat on another one to the side, pulling out a phone, allowing for a false intimacy. I did not move. I had seen her, and an instant later she, as if she had felt the weight of my gaze, slowly turned her head. Our eyes met. There was no startle, no panic. Just a slow, deep recognition. Her eyes, once always bright with tears or fanaticism, were now a dull gray, like the sky before rain. She looked at me, and in them I saw no plea, no challenge. I saw a serene emptiness. A surrender. The caregiver, absorbed in her screen, noticed nothing. Patricia held my gaze for a moment longer. Then her thin, pale lips moved. She did not say anything aloud, but I read the word clearly in the silent movement. Hannah. I did not know what to do. Getting up and leaving seemed cowardly. Approaching, impossible. I remained motionless, trapped in that strange instant, outside of time and space, in a garden in Portland. It was she who broke the spell. With an almost imperceptible nod of her head, she signaled to the caregiver. The woman stood up, put away her phone, and without a word took the handles of the chair. But before she started to push, Patricia raised a hand slightly, a minuscule gesture, and the caregiver stopped. Patricia looked at me again. Her voice, when it came, was a hoarse whisper, barely audible over the murmur of the water, but to me it was like a shout. I am not asking for forgiveness. The words hit me with their rawness. It was not what I expected. I kept listening, frozen. I no longer know, she continued in that slow, worn-out voice, where intent ends and fear begins. That day I reached out my hand. I wanted to pull you back from the edge. I swear on what I loved most. But in my hand there was so much fear. Fear that your child would be a girl, fear that he would be weak, fear of the cousins, fear of Edward's gaze, that the push became something else. It was no longer a pulling away, it was an elimination. And I could not separate them. All my life I have confused pushing away with destroying. The nanny, my own losses, you. She paused, breathing with some difficulty. I do not deserve your forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that maybe in another place, in another life, my hand would have only gently pulled you back from the edge. She fell silent. The sun played on the deep wrinkles of her face. She was no longer the woman who had caused harm or the obsessive mother-in-law. She was a human ruin, sitting in a wheelchair thousands of miles from her home, empty of everything, even the fear that had defined her. I had no reply. None of the ones I had rehearsed in my mind fit. The hatred had transformed into something else, a vast, heavy sadness. Not for her but for everything. For the wasted life, for the perverted love, for the child who was lost in the crossfire of so many other people's fears. I nodded slightly, a gesture that was neither acceptance nor forgiveness. It was just acknowledgement. I heard you. She understood. A flicker of something, gratitude or relief, crossed her dull eyes. Then she sank back into her posture, even smaller. She gestured to the caregiver. The woman began to push the chair. They moved away down the gravel path, the soft crunch of the wheels the only sound. Patricia did not look back. I remained on the bench, the book forgotten in my lap, watching as the tiny figure grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared among the trees. I did not cry. I felt an immense weight, but also a light, strange liberation. She would take her truth or her version of it to her grave. I would carry mine. We were no longer bound by hatred, not even by justice. Only by the memory of an act that had damaged us both, in our own ways, and of the little ghost that would always live between us. I took out my phone. I had a message from my dance teacher reminding me about class tomorrow. A normal thing from a normal life I was painstakingly building for myself. As I got up to leave at the end of the path near the exit gate, I saw a man. He was standing leaning against a tree, looking in the direction where the wheelchair had disappeared. He was wearing a trench coat, and the distance kept me from seeing his face clearly, but something in his posture, in the rigidity of his shoulders, felt familiar. He was thinner, seemed smaller. It was Brandon. He must have felt my gaze because he turned his head. Our eyes met across the distance of the garden. There was no surprise in his, only a deep sadness and a resigned acceptance. He made no move to approach me. He did not smile. He just looked at me for 3 seconds that felt like an eternity, as if trying to engrave this final image of me, standing alive, walking away into his memory. Then he lowered his head, turned, and walked away in the opposite direction, melting into the other Sunday strollers until he disappeared. He knew she was here. He came to see her. Or to see if I was here. Or maybe just to wander, to try to understand the wreckage of his world. I would never know, and it no longer mattered. I left the Japanese garden. The street, with its bustle of buses and voices, greeted me like a slap of reality. I walked aimlessly for a while until my feet, of their own accord, took the path to the studio in the Alberta Arts District. It was not a class day, but sometimes they let students use the room to practice. I found it empty in near darkness. I turned on a single light, took off my street shoes and put on my dance shoes. I did not turn on any music. I just stood before the enormous mirror, seeing my reflection. A woman thinner than I remembered, with larger, more serene eyes, with a history written in the line of her shoulders that only she could read. And I began to strike a beat. A sharp, clean stamp against the wood. Then another and another. I started to find a rhythm, any rhythm, making it up as I went. My hands rose, my arms drew circles in the air. My hips slowly found their way. The rhythm of my footwork was not perfect, it was not even good, but it was mine. Strong, present, here now. The sound echoed in the empty room, filling the silence, affirming my existence, beat by beat, strike by strike. Outside, evening was falling over Portland. My life, with its scars and its empty space at the center, was moving on. I was no longer running, I was advancing. And in the echo of my own steps, I finally found the only dirge, and at the same time the only celebration my son would have ever needed. The sound of his mother living. Did you enjoy this story? Leave a comment and hit the subscribe button to support the channel. More tales are on the way.